Okay, tonight it is the long-awaited return of the NBA. Delighted to say that Ryan Jones is back on the show. How are you getting on, Ryan?
Not too bad. And how are you?
Very well, thanks. I guess one way of looking at this from the NBA's perspective is that at least we're not the NFL and at least we're not the MLB. Things haven't gone that badly in terms of getting our game up and running.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. We just had the women's soccer league here. Was really the first sport without obviously quite as much attention to really kick off, and they had a sort of in-season tournament that went really well. It was the quality of play was pretty good, all things considering the layoff, and the tournament was well played, and they kept everybody healthy. So they sort of set that bar, and the NBA now are trying to sort of follow suit where Major League Baseball has gotten off to a really rough start, obviously, and the NFL, we'll see if that's even manageable. The NBA bubble seems to be working fairly well so far. They seem to be, with a couple of minor exceptions, keeping the guys there and intact and following the rules for the most part. So it seems like it's manageable. It's a league where I think most of the guys seem to get it. And obviously there's a focus right now with a lot of the NBA players that's bigger than basketball with some of the cultural issues here going on right now. So yeah, I think there's optimism that they can pull it off and that if they start out with people staying healthy, that they can maintain that.
Not every player is available as a result of the creation of this bubble. When it comes to the teams that have made it this far into the NBA season, the 8 teams that have got ditched at this point, of
Right.
the teams that are remaining, which team has been most affected by those that aren't going to be available?
It doesn't look like any of the real serious contenders are. I mean, the Lakers, and their depth has been the question about that team since they brought LeBron and Anthony Davis in together, but they look like they'll be okay. The Clippers, the same with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. The Bucks, sort of the Eastern favorites right now. Obviously, we're sort of dominating the league ahead of time. And then you've got that second tier with the Sixers and probably the Rockets. And so I think of the elite teams, there aren't really any missing players where you say, okay, this team missing this guy is going to keep them from having the shot they should have. So I think for the sake of making this stretch run here, this sort of shortened regular season, then heading into this playoff that they sort of made up on the fly, I think the contenders are all going to be, it looks like at least so far, going to be okay as far as the guys they've got and the star players really being available, both for the fan perspective and to give these contenders a real shot.
Yeah, well, let's get stuck into some of those contenders because tonight we get things underway with an unbelievable game, really. The Clippers against Lakers. It's exactly the sort of game we wanted to whet the appetite immediately. Let's start with the Clippers. Things were coming together to them nicely before the break. I saw an incredible statistic earlier on that Kawhi, Patrick Beverley, and Paul George have missed a combined 51 games this season. Right. Things are going to come together nicely for them at this point. The bubble has been a positive for the Clippers.
I think so, and that was always the question with those guys. Kawhi has had stretches in his career, a number of stretches where he's had a hard time staying healthy, and obviously that run up to, with his time ending in San Antonio and then in Toronto, where it was a question of him almost saving himself for the playoffs and taking chunks of the season off, and whether he needed to or he was just sort of doing that because he could. But if those three guys are healthy and they've got a pretty good bench unit as well, the Clippers are a very scary team, and we haven't really seen them at full strength. With George and Beverly, like you said, for an extended amount of time right now. So I have a hard time looking at them based on what Kawhi Leonard has done, knowing that, how hungry Paul George is to kind of put himself up on that elite top tier. I think the motivation for him, especially as a Southern California guy, playing nearly at home, there's just a lot of motivation for that team. And they also know that breaking out of the shadow of the Lakers, which the Clippers have never been able to do, to be able to do it in a year where the Lakers are also very good and have LeBron, would be a really remarkable thing for them. So I think the motivation's there. They seem to have the health. And if they can keep, certainly Kawhi and Paul George healthy, I think they've got a great shot right now.
Is there a shot that it changes the scene in Los Angeles whatsoever when it comes to basketball? Because you could say that there would be bragging rights on offer tonight if Clippers had any fans.
Short term, yeah. The Lakers are, I grew up in Southern California in the 1980s, so I grew up on those Showtime teams, and I grew up knowing the history of the teams that had come before. And obviously then you had the Shaq and Kobe years, and then just the Kobe years after that. So the Lakers have had, half a century or so to really establish themselves. So they're so ingrained with the city and the city's fan support. The Clippers they'd enjoy the bragging rights for as long as they're very good right now. But as far as how that city, sort of the heartbeat of the city basketball wise, the Lakers, they'd have to win a lot more for much longer to be able to kind of compete with the Lakers on that level.
For sure. And the Lakers would have to be pretty terrible for a long, long time, and probably have to behave in a terrible way and like sicken their entire fan base by doing something. Just on George and Kawhi, like, where is the ceiling for these guys? Like, as you say, we've barely seen them play together in the Clippers uniform so far. But just from what you've seen individually throughout their careers, if they build up a little bit of cohesion for the remainder of this season into next season, is there a chance that we're seeing a modern great duo here?
I think so. I mean, neither of those guys is in their, mid-20s or whatever. So, I mean, they've both got a few years on them. And again, both have had some injury issues. The knock on George has been that he's one of the better all-around players in the league, a great defender. And when he's playing well offensively, he's on the level of almost anyone. But the knock on him has been that he's not a guy who has stepped up in the playoff opportunities he's had, has not been a guy who's hit big shots. There's been that knock on him. It's a little unfair. But he hasn't yet shown it on the level, certainly that Kawhi has, or LeBron, or some folks like that. So whereas Kawhi, obviously, particularly last year and in the previous Spurs title run, he's shown that he's a guy for those big elite moments in a way that very few other players in the league are right now. So I think for the two of them together, does Kawhi sort of by default become the guy down the stretch if they need a big shot or a big stop, or is George going to have opportunities to step up and will he take those opportunities? And that's really what remains to be seen for me with that team. If George can perform in big moments and maybe, with a bit less pressure, knowing he's got Kawhi Leonard there, that he doesn't have to do it all or even most of the job, you would think that might ease some pressure on him and allow him in those sort of big moments to play a little more relaxed, and that could make the difference for him. So I think if they win this year, and again, health permitting, because that's been a challenge for both those guys, but health permitting, if they win this year, you could see at least a couple more years where they're going to be really, really tough to beat.
For sure. Let's talk about Lakers. Has the bubble been a good thing or a bad thing for LeBron and the Lakers?
I think it's been really good. The knock would be, or I guess the question would be, LeBron and AD really just hitting their stride playing together. And LeBron, a guy who is so, really unequaled right now, probably in the league at making his teammates better. And so the more time he has with guys, the more they know his tendencies, the more he knows their tendencies, and the better he can sort of put them in positions. I think he and AD figured that out pretty quickly, and it helps when one's LeBron and one's AD, right? They're both so good. And AD, you throw anything up within about 15 feet of the rim, he's probably going to dunk it. So that eases things up a bit too. I think, like I said, the knock would be that they were maybe building some real momentum before the bubble, and that, okay, do you lose that? Does that cost you something? But with LeBron, I go back to, before last season, when they flamed out, before this season, when the Lakers didn't make the playoffs, he had a summer off for the first time basically since his second season in the league. And if you looked at how many games he played in that stretch and how long his seasons had gone for so long, my thought with him was that given the time off and the motivation of not making the playoffs for the first time in so long, that he was really going to come back refreshed and motivated. And I think we saw that. So I think, to me, whatever they may have lost in motivation, whatever they might have lost in momentum, I think the motivation and even additional rest for LeBron now could be invaluable for him, because, again, he's got a ton of mileage on his legs. He's got the mileage, considering all the playoff games, of a guy who's, 37, 38. So I think a rested and certainly motivated LeBron, and if AD is able to stay healthy, again, the lack of depth around them is still a little bit of a question. Is Kuzma going to be able to step up and play well? The rest of that supporting casting, they brought in J.R. Smith now, so you've got a guy with at least that championship experience and experience alongside LeBron. So I think that, I think the Lakers are well positioned after this break and being in the bubble as well. Again, if LeBron stays healthy, you have to give them a shot against anybody, right? If AD is healthy as well, that duo is still going to be awfully difficult for anyone else to deal with.
Without question. I think before the break, the momentum behind LeBron as a potential MVP candidate had started to heat up a little bit. I'm sure most people, if you polled them today, would still say Giannis is unquestionably the MVP decision. But this is the reason why I presume most neutrals want to see LeBron go up against Giannis in the NBA Finals this year.
Yeah, I mean, the head-to-head matchup, of AD and Giannis, these two sort of freakishly long, athletic, versatile players. But as far as two MVP caliber guys, LeBron and Giannis, and LeBron with all he's already accomplished, and Giannis with the MVP, probably another one now, and getting to the verge of that truly elite level, but not having yet really proven it in the playoffs. Last year there was a sense that the Bucks system and his shortcomings were exposed a little bit in the playoffs there, where it was like, well, hey, if you can just, force this guy to have to dribble every time, and you can contest that and double him in the lane and force the rest of those guys to make plays around him, you can beat him. And that worked out. He's clearly better. I think the Bucks are clearly a better team. There's no doubt. I think that Giannis learned from that, and that they learned from that as a team. So I think, they still need to be the favorite given how well they were playing. To me, they're also a little bit of the wild card based on how much the bubble and the break going into the bubble has impacted them. I think it's a little less clear of a benefit, maybe, in my opinion, than it is to the Lakers and Clippers. But to have that matchup in the finals would be incredible. Yeah, as far as star power and the established veteran guy against the young up and coming new star. And again, throw AD in there, who's again one of the best all-around players in the game, would be an incredible matchup.
So what has Giannis done this season to learn from what happened last year?
It's not. I don't think he's completely changed his game, because why would he, right? His game is already pretty terrifying. But I think he's understood a bit more that he can't just rely on that sort of galloping, striding thing he's done so successfully, especially when they get in transition. Where he just sort of blows by everyone and teams just aren't big and fast enough to stop him going to the hoop. He's got to have a little bit more consistency in his jump shot. I think we're seeing that. He's got to work a little bit more on developing, some moves, some post moves. Again, this isn't, the NBA of 20, 30 years ago, where you really want him posting up in the true sense. But I think he's added some pieces there. I think he's also learning some patience. And that's maybe it as much as anything, sort of understanding, hey, here's what teams are going to do to defend you. And that really, the nature of the NBA has always been, you may be able to be much better than a team in one head-to-head matchup. But when matchups can be a focus over a 6 or 7 game series, you might be able to do 2 or 3 things that really hit at the weaknesses of a superior team. And I think that's what we saw last year. And I don't think the Bucks are nearly as susceptible to that this year. I think Giannis is going to be more patient. I think he's less likely to get frustrated by the kind of, I don't want to say junk defenses, but the sort of defensive approaches that teams have had to kind of adapt specifically for him. So I think becoming a better passer, a more trusting teammate, not that he wasn't those things, but I think there was room to improve on those. And I think we started to see that with him. And I think that's why they're going to be very tough to stop.
Yeah. So just for clarity, you think they're going to win the NBA championship, the Bucks?
Yeah, I'm going really back and forth on those 3, and that's a cop out, I know. I think that it's really, yeah. If I had to pick right now, it sounds like you're telling me I do, right? I think I would pick the Bucks. They were just so dominant to start. They did, the last Laker head-to-head meeting, I guess, was right around Christmas. You could see they were just a better team, and it took the Lakers and LeBron really sort of playing, going all out and clearly motivated and energized by the matchup. But the Bucks were just a better team. And so, yeah, I think if I had to right now, I'd pick Milwaukee. I think they're just playing it again. Giannis primarily is playing at a level, and they've got the right pieces around him. I think they're well coached, and they've got a good system for what he does well and what they've got around him. So I'd probably pick the Bucks over the Lakers right now, but I think all 3 of those teams have a great shot.
Is there, I guess this is what is the way of framing this question? If there was one team in the East who could potentially upset things, who is it going to be? Because you look through the teams, and certainly it seems to me the team with the most on the line in the rest of the East outside of Milwaukee is Philadelphia. This kind of feels existential. That this team has been built on the premise that you should be qualifying for the finals with this level of talent available to you, especially with LeBron gone from the East. But it's still not going to happen, is it?
I think it could. There again, Embiid and Simmons are 2 really, I don't want to say unique, but pretty rare talents, and to put the 2 of them together, and they've had that system going now for a few years, so I think they have the potential. But they've also been trying to figure that team out, and it's still been an ongoing process, right, to figure out how well those 2 fit with each other. And do they clog the lane? Do they get in each other's ways? How do they best complement each other? Ben Simmons has finally made a 3-pointer, so there's been some growth there. But I still think, again, look how close Philly was last year against Toronto, right? It just takes that bounce. If that bounce goes different, then maybe we're talking about Philly as a defending champs, or at least the defending Eastern Conference champs. So I don't think they're far off. Embiid is a monster, and if he's healthy, I think the bubble and the break going into the bubble certainly could be great for him, because he's had this sort of wear and tear issues already at this point in his career. So I think that could be a real plus for Philly. Again, yeah, I think it's going to be a tough tough climb for them against Milwaukee, but I think they've got a shot. And I think they're the one team, Boston, when they've played well, they've looked really, really tough. And Tatum is kind of emerging into that, maybe top tier guy. But I don't think they're quite there with this team. And I'm not entirely sure I trust the sort of chemistry with that team all the way through, which again is maybe a little bit of an issue with Philly as well. So I think both those teams could, if they get hot. Again, this short run into the playoffs is what's going to be interesting, because you're not going to have that sort of the way teams usually pace themselves. Teams that know they're going to be in the contention are sort of able to pace themselves over the last few weeks of the season and rest certain guys and maybe try out different lineups to figure out where you're going to get your depth and things like that. This is a very different time. They basically have this couple of weeks, and then they're hitting the playoffs on the fly. So I think that could, that might impact things. But yeah, I think Philly, maybe Boston have a shot of upsetting Milwaukee. But again, it's going to take them, either of those teams, playing really perfect basketball.
It's going to be really interesting as well if you get one of these play-in series, which people have been talking about. And one of the potential matchups, and it's back to the West here, that people have been talking about is Memphis against New Orleans, and the potential to see Ja Morant go up against Zion Williamson. Of course, it's a dream scenario that it's a play-in series. So I'll just put that one to you. Who's your rookie of the year, and which of those individuals is most likely to make the playoffs?
Man, it's, the Zion Williamson thing is funny, because it does remind me a bit of LeBron coming out of high school and the hype with him coming into the league. And in a way, Zion has even been better as a rookie. I mean, there was that obviously that delayed start where they were very probably, cautious to a fault, but I think it was clearly the right thing to do, because you saw the level he was playing at. I mean, he's a phenomenal talent, and it's not just the athletic ability. He's already showing that he knows how to play defense, and he can pass, and he can shoot, and he should get better in all those areas. So if he can stay healthy, I still worry about a kid that heavy jumping that high all the time, because you got to land on those knees, right? But yeah, he's just remarkable. And so, they've got some pieces around him there. They've got some shooters. They got Drew Holiday. They got a floor general. They've got some guys who could theoretically put together a little bit of a run. Memphis, again, a pretty young team, an exciting team. I think Ja Morant, based on body of work, has got to be that guy for Rookie of the Year to me. But that would be a really, really fun matchup to see in any context. I mean, those guys, those are two of the future of the league guys that you're talking about over the next, hopefully, 10, 15 years. And that would be a blast.
For sure. One last question then. What's your take been on the messages that are going to appear on the jerseys over the next little while, and some of the decisions that people have taken? I see Gordon Hayward has gone for education first, or he's gone for I want to say the softest anti-racist message possible. Is that fair to say?
I think that's probably kind to say. I don't know Gordon. I don't want to impugn his character at all. But yeah, that was. I've never been to the NBA, but as a white person who's worked in around the NBA a lot in media and has known a lot of NBA players, and it seems like the least you could do at that point was just go ahead and go with equality or something. At a bare minimum, to pick education reform, which can kind of mean a lot of different things, not all of them necessarily beneficial, to Black people generally. I'm not sure what the decision was there. The thing I had said early on more broadly about the league taking this was when they gave guys a limited list of what the options were. That right away told me that, well, some guys are not going to feel comfortable with this if it can't be pretty personal. If you can't put the name of one of these police brutality victims on your jersey, or, a message that was a little bit more personal to you, the fact that they were dictated options, that right away made me wonder. And what I then wondered was, are there going to be players who say, this isn't how I want to express myself? And of course, LeBron was one of the first. He's been so present with that on a number of levels. For him to decide, no, I'm just going to keep my name on my jersey, I'm doing other tangible things, and other players have kind of followed suit there. I think we'll get used to it pretty quickly, right? We'll get used to seeing these things on there. The NBA is far from perfect. It's still a giant, corporate entity essentially, and so. It's got its motivations, but I think it was a good gesture, certainly, at least to allow the players to do something along these lines. The fact that they're not going to force these guys to stand for national anthems, I think, is a no-brainer. I'm glad that's happening, and so hopefully the chance they've been great about it so far in the bubble. So many players in their interviews have put the focus on Breonna Taylor and that shooting in Kentucky that no police have still been arrested for, which is awful. So I think, yeah, as long as that allows the focus continue to be on these issues in a positive, constructive way, I think it's great.
For sure, and it's always been the league that's been at the forefront of these sort of things, so it's great to see it continue on that vein over the last little while. Listen, Ryan, you're going to be back with us on Saturday on the Saturday panel. Much more chat on that front as well. A very special US Sports Saturday panel coming your way on Off the Ball this weekend. I'm sure we're going to chat to you on this show very soon as well, because there's plenty of basketball over the next little while. Ryan Jones, appreciate you taking the time out of your holiday to take the call this morning.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Always fun. Thank you.